This from our Ravens reporter Jameis Winston said Ronnie Stanley addressed the media after signing a deal to stay with the Ravens. He said, quote, "I was going to give Baltimore the best bargain that I would offer to any other team. That being said, I wanted to be happy with what I'm making and make sure I'm getting the value that I deserve." Felt like he got that, so good for Stanley and good for the Ravens. Let's get back to some top stories. Adam, start with the Bengals paying both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
All right, Laura, the Bengals answered a major offseason question, making Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history and making T. Higgins the highest paid wide receiver, too, in NFL history. They keep the core of their team together and ensure that Chase, Higgins, and Burrow will spend the primes of their career playing together in Cincinnati. Meanwhile, the Houston Texans made All-Pro cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. the highest paid defensive back in NFL history. He tops J.C. Horn, the Panthers cornerback who got his extension done last week. Stingley gets 3 years, $90 million, $89 million guaranteed for the way he's played like an All-Pro in Houston. Meanwhile, everybody's waiting on a decision from Aaron Rodgers. He continues to be linked with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with the New York Giants. Well, there continues to be some speculation about what level of interest the Vikings might have. It doesn't sound like Minnesota is the likely landing spot right now, but it certainly can't be ruled out. And so we'll wait to see what Aaron Rodgers decides to do in the end, while Russell Wilson also waits to make his own decision. He's visited with the New York Giants. He's visited with the Cleveland Browns. He's mulling what he would like to do here going forward. The Steelers have some level of interest in bringing him back to Pittsburgh, but it seems like everybody's waiting to hear from Aaron Rodgers first before the other quarterbacks decide. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Falcons kept Kirk Cousins on their roster, as they said they would, past Saturday, which means that triggered a $10 million roster bonus next season that becomes guaranteed. Now, the Falcons feel like if they trade him, the acquiring team would then be responsible for that $10 million roster bonus, which is why they were willing to keep him around. But it's just more guaranteed money for Kirk Cousins, who would like a change of scenery. Both sides are dug in right now, and it doesn't seem like we'll get anything now on Kirk Cousins until after the NFL draft at the earliest.
Yeah, woo. All right, Acha, let's start there. Is keeping Cousins a good idea for the Falcons?
It absolutely is, and at least for now, that's the issue with Kirk Cousins, is the fact that the trade value for him isn't high. He ended last season not only as a backup, but I think it was 9 interceptions in the last 5 or so games. He struggled, and so teams aren't going to want to give up draft capital for Kirk Cousins. But that doesn't mean that the 13-year NFL vet going into year 14 isn't a value add for Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. played a national championship in college. Michael Penix Jr. has an electric arm, but Michael Penix Jr. also needs to understand the game at a higher level. There is a benefit for young quarterbacks learning from veterans, and I get it. They were on the team last year. He had his 1-year runway, but it wouldn't hurt to give him another year if you cannot get a high level of draft capital for Kirk Cousins. So I think it's wise for Atlanta to keep Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty expensive mentor you got in the building. That said, I don't disagree because Michael Penix Jr. also has a pretty significant injury history. So if you were to move on from Kirk, I don't know what the plan would be as a backup, but it would most likely be a pretty significant downgrade from Cousins, even at this point in his career. The other reason, and Sam, you're right about this, there's not a lot of draft capital likely to be had in a trade. So while you would be able to potentially incur some cap savings, as you see here, although if you had to eat into his contract a little bit to do a trade, you would limit those savings to some degree. I do question whether it would be worth it given how likely little they're going to get in return. So this is not an easy one for Atlanta by any means, but of course it's a situation of their own making.
Yeah, you mentioned the cap savings. There's a couple benchmarks there, maybe after the draft, depending on teams that still need a quarterback, and then that post-June 1 area where they could have some savings. Cousins has a $40 million cap hit in 2025. 7th highest in the league. All right, there's been a lot of wide receiver movement so far this offseason. DK Metcalf was traded to the Steelers. Deebo Samuel traded to the Commanders. Devontae Adams signed with the Rams. Christian Kirk traded to the Texans. Joshua Palmer signing with the Bills. As you see it all right there, it gets you excited for next year. Adam, take us through a couple wide receiver moves from this weekend. Let's start with Juju Smith-Schuster.
He's returning to the Kansas City Chiefs, Laura. The Chiefs had an interest in bringing him back. He had an interest in returning back to Kansas City. Gets a one-year deal done to go back to the Chiefs, where he gets the opportunity to play with Patrick Mahomes and become a free agent again after this upcoming season. As for another big wide receiver move that was made over the weekend, Cooper Kupp went from the Los Angeles Rams to the division rival Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have been in need of another wide receiver. They moved on from Tyler Lockett. They traded DK Metcalf. It left Jackson Smith and Jigba really as the one lone established wide receiver. Enter Cooper Kupp, who gets a 3-year, $45 million deal from the Seattle Seahawks. He obviously is familiar with the area. He went to school in that area, knows the state very well, and is thrilled to be in Seattle now, teaming up with Sam Darnold to try to help replace some of the wide receiver losses that the Seahawks incurred this offseason.
As much as we all kind of thought maybe he would stay on the West Coast, let's talk specifically about the scheme in Seattle. Mina, is Kupp a good fit there?
Yeah. I think it makes sense for the vision, and this sort of affirms what I think was behind the decision to move on from Geno to Sam, aside from the cost savings and the draft pick they acquired in the trade, which is this is not a rebuild in Seattle. It's a retool with a very specific schematic vision, which is centered around their offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak. It's a Kubiak offense they want to call. Shanahan, McVay from the same tree. They want to put Sam under center. They want to run play action. They want to boot him out. They want a wide zone rushing attack. Their hope is that he's the right quarterback for that it'll help the offensive line, and that Cooper Kupp, who has been in that offense now for years, can contribute as a blocker, amongst other things, as well as a guy who can get you yards after the catch. He is not the separator he was early in his career, no doubt. But when you think about the overarching vision of this offense, and I think what they're trying to build, then it starts to make sense in that context.
Yeah, to your point, the versatility is so attractive. Adam, still a lot of veteran wide receivers available, though. What are you hearing about that market?
Well, it's an interesting market right now, Laura. You've got Stephon Diggs that's still sitting out there, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Tyler Lockett, some quality veteran wide receivers. Obviously, some coming off injury, but a lot of receivers there that could help teams. But there's that many veteran wide receivers out there that doesn't help each of the receivers as they try to land a deal in a new place. But again, if there's a team looking for wide receiver help, it's certainly available to them. Meanwhile, one player who was on the move this weekend was the former 49ers running back Jordan Mason, dealt to the Minnesota Vikings Saturday night with a 2025 6th